Hey, folks. Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Hey, I apologize that I'm a few minutes late here. To be dead honest with you, it has been a bit busy the past few days. My daughters, who are 15 and 11, started school on Monday. As I just get my act together here, we got the live chat going on. Okay, everyone. Hello. Sorry about this. I know I said 4 o'clock. It was 4:04, but a little busy since Monday as the girls started school, running around, picking up practices after school. You guys, a lot of people watching know how that is, of course, who have kids and grandkids. So much apologies. I know that our Watchman audience is very forgiving. Thank God you've given me a lot of grace. You give me a lot of grace on things like this. So thank you very much. Hey, let's get right into it. We already missed the first 4 minutes, so I'll go 4 minutes longer here. But let's see who we have here. We have people around the country, around the world joining us. We'll have thousands before we are done, so this is good. We have breaking news to start with, folks. Israeli airstrikes in Syria. Where have we heard that before? I don't know, hundreds of times over the past several years. Breaking. This just came across the wire shortly before I came on air with you here, so it's good that we have this breaking news capability. Israel, allegedly, but of course it was most likely Israel. Israel will neither confirm nor deny the famous last words of Israeli officials, Israeli military officials, when it comes to this sort of thing. But Israel, it looks like, carried out airstrikes today, which will be Wednesday night in Syria, targeting sites near Damascus International Airport and literally targeting Aleppo International Airport, sort of in the northwestern part of Syria. Now, we don't have a lot of details yet. Again, this is breaking news I'm bringing to you here on this live stream. What we do know is that according to Syrian state media and Assad regime sources, that there was no major damage done. Perhaps there wasn't in this case. Usually Israel does a good deal of damage and sets back Iran's programs in Syria. More on that in a minute, because, hey, if you've been watching the newscast, you know we just had an Israeli airstrike in Syria last week that was very significant. More on that in a minute. But today, to the breaking news, I think this is interesting, folks. And number one, you might say, okay, in and around Damascus, you hit Aleppo International Airport. What exactly was Israel targeting? Folks, do the math. You know this well. Again, if you're a regular viewer of this newscast, clearly Iranian weapons transiting through Syria. This is not hard to understand at this point. Sadly, Iran is determined to establish that forward base in Syria to make it a nexus, really, of weapons development, and that includes precision-guided missiles, among other nefarious activities by Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps within Syria. So we had a situation back in June where Israel literally bombed the runway at Damascus International Airport and shut that airport down for the better part of a week or two. Message sent, you would think, to the Iranian regime. Israel said, hey, enough is enough. We know that these cargo planes are coming from Tehran to Damascus, packed with weapons and weapons parts that you will distribute, Iran, distribute to your proxies in Syria, ultimately to be shipped on to southern Lebanon into the hands of your most lethal proxy, Hezbollah. Israel says, hey, enough is enough. So they bombed the runway at Damascus International Airport, and I think it was pretty predictable that, and we reported this on the newscast, that Iran would maybe tamp down their activities at Damascus International Airport, because obviously Israel was on to their game there, and perhaps move more shipments through Aleppo International Airport. And if today's airstrikes are any indication, that's exactly what's been happening. And Israel is saying, hey, just because we hit you hard at Damascus Airport, don't think all of a sudden we're going to allow you to transit weapons through Aleppo Airport. And I believe Aleppo is the second largest. It may even be larger in terms of population than Damascus, the capital, but it's one of the top two largest cities in Syria. It has, of course, an international airport. So now Aleppo. We have seen so many strikes, folks, in and around Damascus, in particular, that Damascus International Airport over the past few years, right? We've been reporting this consistently here in the newscast. Could Aleppo become a new focus of the Israel Defense Forces for the reason that it could become a focus of Iran. Iran could say, let's kind of go around Damascus now and go through Aleppo instead. And hey, Damascus has been a red line for Israel. Aleppo will be a red line as well. It's all a red line. Iran's attempts to transit precision-guided missiles and missile parts through Syria into the hands of Hezbollah, and not just into the hands of Hezbollah. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps are on the ground, very active in Syria. And hey, they would like to equip those missiles and set them up to be launched from Syrian soil as well. Not just by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but Syria, Lebanon, obviously right next door to each other, to the north of Israel. No comment yet by the Iranian regime or any various terror factions or Iranian terror proxies in Syria regarding these airstrikes. Certainly, as I mentioned at the top, no comment from Israel. Will there be some sort of response by Iran? It depends on what was targeted and how effective and how hurtful, how badly it hurt the Iranian regime, these targets. Was there a Revolutionary Guards Corps officer or official killed, as we've seen in some of these strikes over the years? Then Iran may feel compelled to react, but so far, nothing. But I think, again, very indicative of a few things. Number one, Aleppo is now in Israel's sights as, hey, this may now become Iran's new transit point. That's number one. Number two, Damascus still buzzing with Iranian jihadi activity, continues to be a target of Israeli strikes. Number three, Russia. These strikes continue. This was, by my count, actually, I should say by the count of Syrian opposition groups, anti-Assad regime opposition groups, this was number 22 so far in 2022. In 2022, this was the 22nd Israeli strike inside Syria. And hey, the year is not done yet. We're entering the 9th month of a 12-month year, of course. So much more could indeed unfold, folks, over the next 4 months or so before the new year. Israel has continued the strikes despite Russian heavy and harsh Russian disapproval. Israel has also continued the strikes despite having an interim prime minister. Look, Israel bounced from Bibi Netanyahu in June 2021 to Naftali Bennett. Bennett served as prime minister, heading up that far-flung coalition for one solid year until June 2022. And then came Yair Lapid, who was certainly a left-leaning guy. But on this issue, at least, I've said this many times, that Israeli political factions, I'm not talking about the hard, far, radical Israeli left, but the center left, I guess you would call Lapid. I don't agree with him on many cultural issues, certainly, but the centrist, kind of center left, and certainly the right of Israel agree across the board, essentially, that we cannot permit a nuclear Iran. So that's, for all the disagreements you may have with Lapid, that at least is good to know. It appears that he is adamant and will take the steps needed, as long as he's at the helm at least, to prevent a nuclear Iran. And as long as he's at the helm, folks, that may be the key term or key phrase, because remember, November 1st, we will see brand new Israeli elections. Hard to believe. I believe, is this the 5th election in the past 3 years? 4th or 5th in the past 3? I follow this. I live and breathe this stuff. And even I am losing count a little bit. It's a lot of elections. Let's just say that in the span of 3 years. And for all the anti-Israel voices who say, well, Israel is a fascist state. Wow. For a fascist state, they sure have a lot of free elections. Interesting how that works. But it's coming November 1st, and Bibi, clearly, Benjamin Netanyahu, is the favorite to once again become Israel's prime minister. Hey, folks, break this down for a second with me. Netanyahu, the longest serving Israeli prime minister ever. Wrap your head around this. It's really amazing. 15 years as Israel's prime minister in total. Now, he served his first run, some people forget this, from 1996 until 1999. He lost to Ehud Barak, who really had a disastrous term as prime minister, did not last long. I believe it was a year, maybe just under 2 years. And then Barak was out. Ariel Sharon came into office, of course, until 2005, and then he was incapacitated with a stroke. Then you went to Ehud Olmert, who later did prison time. He was prime minister for, I believe, 3 years or so. And then Bibi, 2009, became prime minister once again and served 12 consecutive years until June 2021. So 15 years in all. And guess what? In November, I believe it's November 1st, that next Israeli election, Bibi may once again be the guy. So Lapid may only be in office tomorrow, September 1st. Lapid may only be in office for another 2 months. But folks, I've said this before. I'll say it again today. I said 4 months. I said 3 months. 2 months is an eternity in the Middle East, the world's most chaotic and volatile and strategic region. A lot can happen between now and November 1st, without a doubt. And we're going to get into that today. But one more thing to keep in mind, and again, Bibi is the favorite. He is favored in November. We'll see what happens. I believe personally that Bibi had a highly successful tenure as prime minister and accomplished a lot of great things. And in meeting with him off the record, as part of the first ever evangelical media and business leader delegation to travel to Bahrain and the UAE back in late April. You saw my reports here on the newscast and on the Watchman TV show. We also spent time in Israel and had an off-the-record meeting with Netanyahu. And my friend Joel Rosenberg, who led the delegation, best-selling author, of course, he wrote a piece afterwards. Again, we couldn't talk about the contents of the meeting. It was off the record with the former prime minister. But Joel said, and I agree, that Bibi appeared tanned, rested, and ready. He's ready. He's ready to be prime minister once again. And I believe that his sole rationale for being prime minister is Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu, I believe, sees himself as a Churchillian figure. What do I mean by that? I know that Winston Churchill, a man I greatly admire, one of my heroes, and Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi is an admirer, no doubt, of Winston Churchill. And I say Churchillian in a sense of a few things. First, Churchill saw the gathering storm. He saw that gathering storm of Nazi Germany, and he had the boldness to step up and step out and stand against Hitler when the rest of the world was all too willing to appease. So that's number one. Churchill was a man of vision. And number two, he was a man for such a time as this, or I would say such a time as that, in that he understood the signs and the times. He was like a son of Issachar, in a sense. He knew the existential threat that Hitler and the Nazi scourge posed, and he knew what to do about it. And Churchill stood strong, and Bibi sees himself as the man for the moment when it comes to Iran. He believes that just as Churchill saw the gathering storm of Nazi Germany, and the world, the West in particular, wanted to appease Hitler, Bibi sees a similar scenario playing out right now with Iran. He has always seen the gathering storm posed by Iran and its proxies. Once again, history repeats itself in the most disastrous ways. We see the West looking to appease a modern-day fascist regime. The Iranian regime is an Islamo-fascist, totalitarian regime with evil plans and wicked aims. Bibi sees it clearly. Much of the world, sadly, does not in our morally relativistic times, just as Churchill faced in the 1930s and the run-up to World War II. So a Churchillian figure, what do you think? Leave a comment here. We've got the Q&A session at the end. Is Bibi a Churchillian figure? I believe he is. I mean, we could use a church. He's not in Europe like Churchill was. He's in the land of Israel, of course. But, wow, could the West use a Churchillian figure today? What do you think? Is Bibi a Churchill? Is Bibi a Churchill? Let me check some of our messages here. What do we have? Okay. Nothing yet. But will Bibi be the man? We'll be following very closely. In the meantime, one last thing to mention about Syria and those airstrikes. We reported earlier this week on the newscast, and by the way, I assume if you're here with us, one of the thousands with us right now on a live stream from around the world, God bless all of you guys and gals So glad to have you with us. I assume if you're joining us for a live stream, you're probably a subscriber. If you're not, hey, please stand with us shoulder to shoulder as watchmen and women on the wall and subscribe to our channel. It's real easy. Just click subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. And click that notification bell, the like button, and that helps us out a great deal. We're pushing now. It's hard to believe. My daughter was saying, Dad, because YouTube is much more important to younger kids now than TV. I've been on TV since my daughters were babies, and they walk by the television set today and they'll see me on TV. They'll say, Dad's on TV. But YouTube, my word, once I hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube and got what's called the silver play button, I was suddenly the coolest dad ever. And they were telling their friends about it, bringing their friends over to see the silver play button. So my daughters, who are awesome, are always very on top of what I'm doing on YouTube. And they keep saying, Dad, you need to hit 500K. That would be incredible. So if you could help us hit 500,000 subscribers, that would be incredible. God has brought us a long way, hasn't he? And I say, if you've been with us a few months, a few weeks, some of our loyal viewers here have been with us for 2 years. We really ramped the channel into overdrive in February 2021, about a year and 8 months ago. A year and 7 months, I should say. We really doubled down and started going on a daily basis and expanded. And we've just, no pun intended for what we talk about, we've exploded here, our numbers on the news channel. And folks, it's humbling because I know it's the Lord. It's God Almighty. It has nothing to do with me. And this channel is by God and for God. And as long as we stick to that, he's going to honor it. And we think he'll expand our territory, not for our sake or for our ego, but to reach millions, we hope, with the message for such a time as this, a prophetic message, we hope. So I say all that to say thank all of you and spread the word if you like what you're hearing, and hopefully we can get some other people on board. Again, for such a time as this. That phrase has not gotten old in 2,600 years since Mordecai said it, and it never will because God's in it. Okay, one last thing to mention about those airstrikes. We reported earlier this week that Russia is in the process of removing that S-300 missile defense system, or air defense system from Syria. Now, in particular, it was stationed around northwestern Syria, not really far from Aleppo, actually, which we talked about a minute ago. Masayef, the Masayef region. Apologize if I'm not pronouncing that with perfect Arabic enunciation, but Masayef was the site where this S-300 was mainly located, and now Russia has removed it. This is important for two reasons. Number one, Russia apparently is taking the S-300 system, which, by the way, could only be operated by Russian soldiers in Syria. Syrian soldiers, Assad regime soldiers, very interesting wrinkle here, right? Were not allowed to touch that S-300 system. Only Russian troops were allowed to operate that Russian hardware. Very interesting. Shows you who the senior partner was in that relationship. And back in late May, and Benny Gantz, the Israeli defense minister, later confirmed this. He said, it was a one-shot thing, thankfully, a one-time thing. But S-300 missiles were fired at Israeli fighter jets that were conducting airstrikes in Syria. That means that Russian soldiers manned those S-300s and fired at Israeli aircraft. It happened. So, and Gantz confirmed that back in late May. But now the S-300s are being pulled out for now. Perhaps they will return because Russia certainly, folks, don't get it twisted. They are in Syria to stay. But I believe Russia is struggling in that Ukraine campaign still. Russia likely will eventually win out and wear Ukraine down. At least conventional thinking says that. We try to not think conventionally here on the Watchman. On paper, it seems Russia clear advantage, obviously, but this has not gone well for Russia, this campaign, which launched back in February. And now Russia needs the S-300 to deploy in Ukraine and perhaps even in Russia to defend against Ukrainian counterattacks. So that's the deal there with removing the system from Syria. But the Masayef, the other important part about this is, could the Russian removal of the S-300, and look, Israel had to be cognizant of that before carrying out the strikes, right? Clearly, there's always the risk when they're carrying out strikes in Syria where there are thousands of Russian troops stationed, where there were S-300 batteries stationed, and where Russia, look, is openly and increasingly aligned with Iran and Hezbollah. Of course, it gave Israel pause, I'm sure, and they had to be very careful. They continue to have this so-called deconfliction mechanism, where Israel basically gives Russia a heads up and says, hey, we're coming in, and Russia doesn't get in the way. I believe that deconfliction agreement is not going to last much longer. And you know that if you've been watching me. I believe there is a great betrayal coming eventually, and Russia will turn on Israel. And I believe there is prophetic implications to that. But in the meantime, it is very tenuous, this deconfliction agreement, but it is still intact for now. But interesting, last week, we reported this on the newscast. Now, it's interesting. This happened last Thursday, 6 days ago. We only reported it on this past Monday. If you missed it, check it out here in our archives under newscasts. And if you missed any of this live stream, by the way, the beginning, the entire thing will be posted when we finish up. But we reported Monday, the details finally trickled out 3 days later, that Israel's airstrikes 6 days ago in Masayef, hey, they were very effective, folks. They eliminated up to 1,000 mid-range Iranian missiles, and reportedly those missiles were, you guessed it, precision guided. Now, Iran had a research center there where they were producing, apparently, these missiles. Reportedly, the center was kind of hardened and embedded deep underground. I don't know that Israel could get at it, but they certainly took out a huge weapons stockpile, eliminated those mid-range missiles. Now, that's the kind of strike that you think may elicit an Iranian response when Israel really hurts them. Because, hey, if you got up to 1,000 mid-range missiles, you've got the intent to use them at Israel's doorstep. It's part of Iran's plans, and you just dashed their plans in a major way. They're not going to be happy about it. But I call it a coup for Israel last Thursday with that strike. As more details came out, I said, whoa. When it happened last Thursday night, I did not report it Friday because we didn't know enough. But over the weekend, the details, as often happens, trickled out, and we reported it here in the newscast on Monday. So that was big. Just a reminder there, the Masayef strike was big. But folks, it never ceases to amaze me. Think about this, and what do you think? Comment here, because we're going to have Q&A. If you have any questions, I'd like to get your feedback on this. Do you notice a trend that I have noticed? Man, no matter how hard Israel hits Iran and its proxies, I mean, sets them back, sets back their arsenals, weakens them, even embarrasses them in the eyes of the world. Think about what Israel has done on Iranian soil over the past few years. I mean, striking the regime on Iranian soil under their noses. I mean, the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, clearly has a strong presence in Iran. You got to say it's embarrassing to Iran time and time again, and consistently pushing Iran back in Syria. And with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, Israel just walloping them as well, and much deserved, by the way. These are responses from Israel to terror and terror plots, but Israel's hitting them hard, and yet they don't seem to get the message. The resilience in this case, maybe I don't think resilience is the word. I think the evil, the demonically driven, let's use that term, the demonically driven evil that we see displayed by the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people who we love, the regime who oppresses the Iranian people, but the Iranian regime and its proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, they're not going to stop, folks. Let's be honest. These demonic forces want to destroy Israel. They mean what they say. It is a devil-inspired mission that they're on, and they're not going to stop. And a nuclear deal with the Iranian regime is not going to stop them. Yes, will it kick the can down the road perhaps for a few years? Perhaps. It's not going to stop the ultimate endgame or the ultimate goal of the Iranian regime and its proxies. Enshrined in Hamas's founding charter, I believe 1987 that was written, is their declaration that they want to destroy Israel. We exist to destroy Israel. Islamic Jihad exists to destroy Israel, as does Hezbollah. And the Iranian regime, a big component of their existence, besides the fact that they want to spread their version of jihadi Islam around the world and subjugate the world, really. That's what the Ayatollah Khomeini said, the founder of the so-called Islamic Republic. He saw this not just as an Iranian revolution, he saw this as a global revolution. But a central pillar of that is the destruction of Israel. And they are taking policy and making policy that would make that a reality. Folks, they're not going to quit. No amount of appeasement, no Iran nuclear deal, which gift wraps them with billions of dollars in sanctions relief, is going to stop them. Israel is going to have to stop them and defeat them decisively. I don't see any other way around it. And you might say, why Israel? Why just Israel? Good question. I pose the same question. Shouldn't this be the free world, or what's left of it, standing together in solidarity, in unison, against these terrible, evil forces that want to destroy Israel and destroy the West? That's not what we're seeing. You know who's standing with Israel more than the West, than NATO, than the Biden administration? The Sunni Arab nations, like the UAE and Bahrain and Egypt, Saudi Arabia. They're more concerned about Iran, and not just because of geographic proximity. Obviously, that's a huge part of it. But they're more concerned about Iran and more in step with Israel on that issue than the United States government, not the American people, who overwhelmingly support Israel. But the current US government, current governments in Europe. Isn't that a sad thing? So Israel, and these are not, look, the Sunni Arab nations are not military powerhouses. Egypt has a strong military, but Jordan has a strong military relative to its size and excellent intelligence services, but these are not military powerhouses. So look, when the rubber hits the road, and if the Sunni Arab nations get pulled into this against the Iranian axis, the Shia-led axis, Israel is going to carry the vast bulk of the responsibility in that future war that's coming, that future regional war. But isn't that sad that the West, hey, if you look at Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, the book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel, the God of Israel speaking through him, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, makes pretty clear that Israel is going to be, I don't know if the term would be abandoned, but Israel is very much going to be on its own as it deals with this advancing onslaught, this Ezekiel invasion force, the war of Gog and Magog that is coming. I believe it will be a Russian-led invasion force, including Iran, Turkey, and others, former Soviet republics. And Israel will essentially be alone, it seems. If you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, if you have not, do it tonight. So you can see this lining up, can you not? Weak leadership in the West, appeasement-minded leadership in the West, that seemingly will sell Israel down the river. And that it grieves me to my heart to say that. But it appears that a day is coming when that will happen. And here's the good news. There's one who has not abandoned Israel and will never abandon Israel through thick and thin. That's the God of Israel. The God, again, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. My God, your God. He's also the God of Israel, no doubt. He makes that very clear. The Bible says he neither slumbers nor sleeps when it comes to his land and his people. He will intervene directly and in stunning, literally earth-shaking fashion, like he hasn't in 2,000 years since the death and resurrection of his son, the Lord Jesus. He will respond to this Ezekiel invasion force in a way that will be clear for the entire world to see. Anyone without a completely hardened heart will have to say, surely this was God. And yet, many will not. Many will deny that this was divine intervention, where Israel attains this great victory over this Gog-Magog invasion force. You know, you read the book of Revelation and you read certain portions of prophecy. It always amazes me that still after God shows himself time and time again in the days to come during the tribulation period, still Many do not repent. Instead of falling on their knees and crying out to the Lord, they curse him and shake their fist at him. Isn't that something? I guess that goes back to the question I posed a few minutes ago. It never ceases to amaze me about Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. And again, I don't want to use the word resilient because that's a complimentary term. That's usually used as a compliment for people who are doing well and good people who are resilient in the face of adversity. No, it's not that. It's demonically inspired rage and obsession. Let's say that. But wow, never ceases to amaze me. And I think the end game is they have to be decisively defeated and just eliminated as an existential threat. And I believe that's coming. In the Great Northern War that I believe is coming. I think that's a precursor to that Gog-Magog war, by the way. But I think Israel, in the next engagement with Hezbollah, is going to say, this, we're playing for keeps here. Enough is enough. They'll likely strike Iran's nuclear facilities, I believe. And part of that, you would think, has to be going toe-to-toe with Hezbollah once and for all. It's unsustainable. Israel can't accept this any longer, or much longer, to have a terror entity, a terror paramilitary force. Hezbollah can field a standing army of some 40,000 trained foot soldiers, at least at this point, 150,000 rockets and missiles aimed at every inch of the Jewish state with Iranian backing, literally on Israel's northern doorstep. I'm not kidding, folks. I've many times been on that Israel-Lebanon border. You look across the border, Hezbollah fighters are looking back at you. Usually they're in plain clothes with binoculars. They're looking right back at you the whole time. When you are watching them, you are being watched, no doubt. I've seen them, and we captured a few on film we were filming on the Israel-Lebanon border, and you saw this. If you saw our Hezbollah tunnel show along the Lebanon border last year, we had footage of a Hezbollah operative taking pictures of us, filming us right on that border. So literally, this entity is on Israel's border, a stone's throw away. Israel can't put up with that much longer. And now we hear noise that Hezbollah may instigate something with Israel over this Karish natural gas field in the Mediterranean. Could that be the trigger for that Israel-Hezbollah war? Could natural gas even be the trigger to an extent for the Gog-Magog war? Could Israel really become and they're quickly becoming a natural gas superpower? Hey, folks, tomorrow, September 1st, it's going to start getting chilly in Europe in about 2 months or so. You might be kind of looking to put the heat on. And guess what? Some 40% of Western Europe's natural gas is supplied by Russia. Well, Europe announced a few months ago they wanted nothing to do with Russian energy any longer. So where are they going to get their natural gas, their oil? Well, Israel doesn't have much oil at all, if any, but they've got a lot of natural gas. And we saw back in June, European officials in Israel signing an agreement with Israel and Egypt that would supply Israeli natural gas via Egypt to Europe. Europe is looking for energy alternatives. Russia, it's not an option anymore. Where are they going to look? Israel is a logical choice. Guess who's not going to be very happy about that? The natural gas kingpin himself, Vladimir Putin. Already been increasing tensions, obviously, with Israel over the past several months. And you know he's not happy about the fact that Israel is essentially breaking his natural gas monopoly that he had with Europe for years. It's amazing how short. I hate to just gang up on Europe. You know, Europe's a beautiful place. I'm of European descent, of course, and has a proud, incredible history. The continent of Europe, what history! And the gospel went out from Europe for centuries. It was the center of Christianity, shifted from the land of Israel to Europe for many centuries. And now look, and I hate to gang up, but this is not good, to put it mildly. What Israel, the predicament, Europe, has literally put itself under a barrel. And you've seen this clip, I know, folks, and I've seen it a few more times over the past few days because winter is coming. Where have you heard that phrase before? Winter is indeed coming. And Europe is saying, uh-oh, what are we going to do? Because we're on the outs with Russia, clearly. So what is Europe going to do this winter? It's a growing question now. And that clip that I mentioned a second ago, I've been seeing it more and more over the past few days. President Trump, 2018, speaking at the UN, warned Europe. Talk about being prescient at the time. Warned Europe, you are in danger of becoming completely reliant, especially Germany, on Russian energy, Russian oil and natural gas. He said, this is a big mistake. You shouldn't do it. The camera pans to the German delegation that was there watching. And you've probably seen this. If you haven't, do an internet search, you can find it. They're sitting there looking at each other. This guy snickering and giggling. This guy's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, yeah, right. We'll become reliant on Russian gas. Yeah, right. Whatever. Get at it. Well, fast forward 4 years and guess the predicament that Germany is in. Trump was right. He was very right. And now Germany has a lot of egg on its face. And I'm a guy, my last name is Stakelbeck. So I've got some German descent for sure on my dad's side. And Germany could be in trouble this winter. We shall see. But hey, one thing before, wow, it's getting late. We got to get the Q&A. We've got thousands with us. Hopefully thousands more join before we're out. But send your questions along. And I'm going to pull them up right now. One thing I want to mention to you guys, and we got, wow, a lot of questions coming in today. A lot of curiosity. I like this. Okay. I had to mention to you, we talked about the Iran nuclear deal earlier. Yair Lapid, the Israeli prime minister, did a phone call with Joe Biden today about the Iran nuclear deal. Now, we don't know what was said. What we do know is Joe Biden said he's committed to preventing a nuclear Iran. Of course, you're so committed to preventing a nuclear Iran, and I hope Lapid doesn't believe this. You're so committed to preventing a nuclear Iran that you're about to give Iran $100 billion a year in sanctions relief. I'm sorry I laughed, but it's madness. 100 billion, folks, per year, according to Israeli estimates, the Iranian regime will now receive. If you're the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, you can do a lot with $100 billion, especially when your economy is largely in the tank. And that's a lot of ballistic missiles. That's a lot of bombs and rifles that can be supplied to Hezbollah and Hamas. That's a lot of new research centers, quote unquote, that can be built in Syria and within Iran. It's a lot of new nuclear material. And it's coming. This deal could be signed, according to European officials, within a matter of days. You may have some breaking Watchman news here within days that a new Iran nuclear deal has been signed. Here's the essentials. Iran will receive, some have said close to, when it's all said and done, over a period of years, maybe 10 years, 5 years, however long this new deal will be, $1 trillion. How do you like that? $1 trillion to the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, which has American blood on its hands, which has, in the past week alone, yesterday, for instance, an Iranian warship basically got a hold, I guess you would say. It tried to tow, T-O-W, tow, a U.S. sea drone. Now, obviously, the U.S. has aerial drones, but there are sea drones as well, and a little ship-type contraption, and it's a seaborne drone, reconnaissance and all that kind of stuff. So Iran got a hold of this drone and tried to tug it away, pull it away. There was a 4-hour standoff between Iran's Revolutionary Guards, and a U.S. warship arrived, and another U.S. Vehicle arrived, and there was a 4-hour standoff. And then Iran eventually let this drone go, released this U.S. drone. If they're doing that now, when the Iran nuclear deal is close to coming to fruition and the deal is hot, the negotiations are hot and heavy, what do you think they're going to do when they have $100 billion a year? If they're plotting against current and former U.S. officials right now on U.S. soil, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, others, what do you think this financial windfall is going to do? And by the way, The ballistic missile program is not on the table as part of these negotiations. Iran has the most robust ballistic missile program, including precision-guided missiles, PGMs, in the entire Middle East. Iran's sponsorship for Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Shia militias, etc., Islamic Jihad, that's not on the table in these talks. So I ask you, and perhaps someone can answer in the chat, what exactly does the United States, what do the United States and Europe get out of the Iran nuclear deal? Can anyone tell me? I didn't know the first time around in 2015, and I certainly don't know this time around in 2022. And it's much worse this time around because 2015 and the events following proved they're not going to adhere to the deal. And they have evil, ill intentions. Yet we're going to do it again in 2022. So it's a collective madness that has gripped the decision makers in the West. That's the only way you can describe it. We're going down the road again, but this time the stakes are much higher. They're much closer to having the bomb, the enriched uranium stockpiles. And Israel this time, I believe, will have its back against the wall, so to speak, and will be forced to act very likely alone, perhaps some Sunni Arab assistance, perhaps using Saudi airspace, things like that. But Israel is going to say, you know what? And they've said, we're not a party to this Iran nuclear deal. You can do what you want to do. We don't have to follow it. So read between the lines right there. Question time. What do we have? What do we have? Okay. Let's see what we have. Cali Gal. I was just in Cali, Southern Cali. Gosh, what a beautiful place. Can you get a new governor? Because Southern California, gosh, Orange County, such a beautiful place. It's very sad what's happening to that state in general. But the drones, Cali Gal asks, the drones that China is training Iran how to use, are they from the U.S.? I don't believe they are. And it's Iran is actually training Russia. Just slight correction there. Iran is domestically producing these drones. And we reported this on yesterday's newscast. They're developing them at a pretty rapid clip, almost mass producing these unmanned aerial vehicles within Iran, again, domestically produced. They have agreed to supply hundreds of these drones to Russia, their good friends, Vladimir Putin's regime, that Russia will then use in Ukraine. Here's the problem. Russian soldiers have been training on how to use these drones in Iran. The problem, reportedly, the drones aren't faring too well so far. There have been technical issues, and Russia is not happy so far with the Iranian supplied drones. There's a bug in the system, as one person said, and here's too many more bugs in the system of these Iranian-made drones. Moving on, next question. And we've got a few here lined up. Let's see here. Lynn Anderson asks, has Israel started production on their natural gas rig? Well, Lynn, good question. Israel has certainly been getting gas from various rigs over the past few years, but the Karish natural gas installation, that's the one, K-A-R-I-S-H, that Hezbollah is threatening over. Now, it's off the coast, Israel's Mediterranean coast, and to my knowledge, the Karish gas rig has not gone online yet. But soon, I believe it is scheduled to go online. The thing there is Hezbollah says if it does go online, it means war. And Hezbollah a month ago launched a few reconnaissance drones towards that rig, and Israel shot them down, thankfully. But Hezbollah is making a lot of noise about this Karish natural gas installation, and they're making a lot of threats. So we'll see if that could be the trigger for a showdown between Israel and Hezbollah. You know, it's interesting. It's off the coast of Israel. Israel obviously shares a maritime border and a land border with Lebanon. Lebanon never said much about those waters in the Mediterranean until natural gas was struck. And now the Lebanese government and Hezbollah are saying, that's our gas. We want a piece of it. Funny how that works. Or not so funny. Okay, let's move on. But Karish, not online yet, to my knowledge, but Israel saying, hey, we're going along with it. Okay, let's see. Stan Cormy asks, will this Iran deal be scrapped? Before I answer, Sam, welcome to Alan Blackwell, a new premium member. I'm just seeing this on my screen. Hey, Alan, welcome. Just want to mention that we do have premium membership here on the channel. If you're a loyal watchman, woman on the wall who's with us every single day, you love the channel, you can become a premium member. I believe it's only $4.99 a month, not bad. And the main thing is you help to keep us on the air. So that's nice. You help to cover the costs for the channel, which is great. And also you get some nice perks. You get the exclusive first view of every brand new episode of the Watchman TV show. We're going to be doing more premium live streams. Now, we did one a few weeks ago, and we want to do more of those. I should have promoted it more. I don't think a lot of people know we did it. So I'll promote that more in the days to come. We've got some other things, maybe even some Watchman merch. Who would like that? Some Watchman merch. Hoodies, t-shirts, hats. Does that sound good to people? Something we've discussed with the Watchman logo, maybe never hold your peace on the back or on the hat. That could be kind of cool. So we've been talking about that. So some good things coming from premium members. If you are interested, just click on join on the homepage here at the channel, and you can become a premium member. We'd love to have you. If you're not a premium member, we still love you. Don't worry. You can still watch us every single day. Nothing changes. Okay. Angela O'Keefe asks, where did you get your t-shirt? I got this at the North Face store in Jerusalem's Mamilla Mall. I remember exactly when and where I got it. Okay. You might be able to get it online, Angela, at North Face's website. That question, what was that question? Someone asked, will the Iran deal be scrapped? No, I don't think so. As I just detailed, Daisy Lou 2000, welcome. Watchman Premium member. C1 Photography, welcome. Watchman Premium member, new members. Hey, guys, thanks so much. God bless you guys. We appreciate it. No, it's not going to be scrapped. I think quite the opposite. The deal is going to happen. Man, it's hard to see at this point, and this is sad to say, it's hard to see what would kill the deal. I mean, Iran yesterday, for instance, is trying to abduct a U.S. drone at sea, has a 4-hour standoff with U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf, plotting to assassinate former Trump administration officials, attacking U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq with drones and rockets in recent weeks. So instigating war, obviously, against Israel with Islamic Jihad recently. So if none of that has pushed Biden away from the negotiating table and pushed Europe away from the negotiating table, it's hard to see what will. They are, I said earlier, the bad guys, Iran and its proxies, are obsessed with destroying Israel. I think an appropriate word for Western leaders right now might be obsessed with hammering out an Iran nuclear deal no matter what the cost. Running blindly into the slaughter. I don't know if it's literal slaughter, but really short-sighted. That's a nice way of saying it. I've been tough this newscast, I know, but this is no time to mince words. And it's going to have profound implications, a new Iran nuclear deal, for your life, no matter where you live. Because what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. And a regional war, it may not have a physical impact on you. I'm not saying there'll be physical blowback from Iran and its proxies on Western soil. I wouldn't completely count it out. But you think you're having pain at the pump right now, right? Oil and gas prices have been through the roof for months. Who knows what happens to the economy, the global, it's so interconnected now, right? The global, quote unquote, economy and oil and gas. So one way or the other, no matter where we live, we will all feel that Middle East war that Iran is instigating and that Iran wants to bring about and that Iran wants to accomplish through a nuclear means. And this deal, again, kicking the can down the road. Iran bides its time, and then when the deal runs out, they break out, they have the bomb. Okay. Christy Barry asks, what do you think is China's role in end times prophecy and or a Russia-Iran-Turkey alliance? Interesting question, Christy. I've gone back and forth with my brother on this. We've had some really fascinating conversations. Number one, I believe China certainly aligned and friendly with that Russia-Iran-Turkey alliance. But Ezekiel, at least in that Gog-Magog war, does not seem to mention any role of China in that alliance. So although China is a good pal of these rogue regimes and is a rogue regime itself, in my view, I don't think it's going to be physically involved in that Ezekiel invasion. But what does give me pause, and I know there's many different thoughts on this in the book of Revelation, John talks about that 200 million man army that crosses over a dried up Euphrates and essentially invades the Middle East, calls them the kings of the East. Could China be at the head of that massive, massive last days invasion force mentioned in the book of Revelation? Some think it's a supernatural force of 200 million, but kings of the East, certainly China is building itself up today as the king of the East. It would like to be the king of the world superpower. But at any rate, it's hard to see China not playing some kind of role, right? They're just too big of a player and a growing power. And I believe the book of Revelation says those weapons used by the kings of the East will kill, is it a quarter of mankind or 1/3 of mankind? So yeah, China, I can't tell you for certain they're the 200 million man force. But what is clear, I think, is that China will have some sort of role in those days to come. I think it's building up towards that for sure. We've got a lot of new members here, and we have time for one more question. I have to run. Let's see. Sandra Bish asks, why does Iran want a deal? Is it for money? Why don't they just do what they want to do? Why does anyone care about this? What is the point? Well, if you've been watching for the past hour, you know why we care about this. I don't think I have to reiterate that, because if Iran gets the bomb, they'll use it, and that's not good. And if they get the bomb, they don't use it, it will start a nuclear arms race in the world's most volatile region, the Middle East, and that ain't good either. So that's one reason it's not good. And if you live in the US like I do, they're building intercontinental ballistic missiles that could be mounted with a nuclear warhead that could one day reach here where I'm sitting. So that's not good. So yeah, we need to care about it. In terms of the deal, it is for money. Yes, it's for money, but not for money for the mullah's own pockets. Some, sure, money to be diverted to missiles, weapons, nuclear weapons, and terror proxies. That's what the money's for. So that's why they want a deal. It builds up their proxies. Look at what they did in the wake of, they're much stronger now than they were in the wake of that 2015 deal. And they use that money, those billions in 2015, to build up their proxies, their arsenal, and they'll do that again. Also, it just buys them time. They're very patient. Their end game, and the way they look at it is, we're going to have the bomb eventually, whether it's today or 10 years from now. We're very patient. That's their thinking. Hey, folks, it's been great. I do need to run. Great live stream today. God bless all of you. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, with a new newscast. Keep all of this in prayer. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.